Welcome back, one and all, to Podstars, the Punk Stars podcast. It is me once again doing a cheeky intro with this one. Another episode of Release Ramble this time, and we've got a brand new band to talk about their brand new music. Well, one song is brand new, but we'll get to that. We're talking to a band called Picking Up Pedro. They're an American band, an American pop-punk band, who always said that if you or a loved one have been exposed to bad pop-punk, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Either that's a self-burn or a pop-punk burn, and I like both kinds of burns. They did a song very recently in November called Break Up the Wedding, which will be discussed in detail, but I thought it was an interesting one because they actually did an album back in 2014, so they're 10 years since their first EP. They've obviously grown and evolved since that initial release, but the conversation we had was very much about that disconnect between, 10 years ago you and then current you, and the kind of maturity that comes from different kinds of writing and your experiences and the ways that you've evolved, as it were. And it was a very intriguing conversation to have, not only because it's been quite literally a decade since they wrote this record, but just the kinds of experiences they had between records, why they had such a long gap, and why they've returned now just at the end of 2024. So the song came out at the end of November. This episode, I'm recording this, I think, on a Thursday. I don't know, I've lost track of time, it's December. But this will probably be out in the middle of December, so it's only been out for a couple of weeks, so do check it out. But I'll let the band sell themselves on it. It's a really incredible track, really classic pop-punk, very, very reminiscent of the early era and all that kind of stuff, but also has some modern sensibilities and a little twinge that you might enjoy. And it reminded me of that song that Busted did, called Crash the Wedding, which is another great pop-punk song, or Brit-pop song. It's debatable. But either way, thank you very much for Picking Up Pedro for coming on the show. It was a really interesting chat. Thank you for coming on, and I hope you guys enjoy this latest episode. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side. I can see a man's face, and I can hear another man's voice.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got it. Thank goodness. Technology. It's meant to make our lives easier, and yet, here we are.
Right.
Sometimes, just like what they should have done with Stephen Hawking, just turn him off, turn him on again.
Oh, God.
Works better that way. So I'm really tired, so you're going to get a lot of that. Lovely to have you on. Thank goodness. I mean, we only plotted this, a week and a bit ago, but nice to see that I'm actually organised and managed to get this. What was it that you had to move to? Because we were going to do it yesterday, but then we moved it over to today. Was it just that we had an extra person available?
Yeah. I had to work yesterday all day, so.
As per.
Yeah.
Well, thank God we've got two of you now, so we're going to have double the input,
Yes.
which will be even nicer. So welcome on. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I mean, obviously, I had a brief look at your EP from 10 years ago. We'll get to that.
Oof.
And then your brand new single that came out on Friday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So for the audience who will inevitably listen to this whenever it is, please explain to them and me where Picking Up Pedro is from and what the plan is.
Yeah. So we were originally, a long time ago, we were a pop punk band from Central Florida. We were based in Orlando. That's where the two of us grew up. We played around for a while, and then eventually I ended up moving out of the state to Nashville, Tennessee. And kind of for all intents and purposes, it felt like that was sort of the end of that project. I ended up dragging Brandon up here with me as well for a while, and then COVID happened, so that kind of put a lot of stuff on hold. And then Brandon ended up having to move to Michigan for a work opportunity, so got pushed even further onto the back burner. And then earlier this year, we just decided, hey, let's kind of resurrect this thing and see if we can put some new stuff out from there.
And I presume that's when was the initial sort of time when you thought this new song would be coming out? Or did it come out at the time when you expected? Or is it just was it a surprise when everyone suddenly was on board again?
I think we started working on this, 6 months ago? And then we kind of got put on the back burner because we both have other bands too. And then, those bands are actually in the locations that we are. And so they kind of, being able to play is more feasible. And this got put on the back burner a little bit, but it's coming out. The goal was this year, and it happened. So that was the main thing.
Yeah. And I heard it. I actually was just listening to it before we started, and it does have a very, I'd use the phrase, that quintessential pop punk sound that everyone looks for. Were you always looking to be that kind of sound as you were previously, or have you sort of evolved it into something different?
Not at all. Yeah. Originally, this band 10 years ago, this is not the sound we would have gone for. And I think if you listen to that EP from 10 years ago, like it's extremely different from this new song. But I think we're kind of like always playing with pop punk bands, but kind of doing a different thing, and then kind of realizing eventually that maybe we should just kind of do that. You know?
Yeah, it's just a nice sort of a bit of a change, I guess. I mean, considering 10 years ago when that first one came out, did you ever imagine you'd be back here bringing it all together again?
I really didn't. You know, we put out this EP in 2014, and it was just we paid a guy to record it at his home studio, and he quote unquote mixed and mastered it for us. And you know, in a lot of ways, we got what we paid for, but we were broke college kids, so we paid for what we could afford. And we were proud of it at the time. In a lot of ways, I still am proud of it. And we played around on those songs. We wrote a bunch more songs, had several false starts in recording. We did a lot of recording sessions that have never and will never see the light of day for a variety of reasons. So there was just kind of this constant series of setbacks and bang ups and hang ups and stuff like that. And then, like I said, once we kind of both relocated out of where we were, it just kind of felt like, well, okay, I guess that chapter's closed. So I never thought it would happen. I'm glad it did. But if you'd asked me, do you think that's ever going to be a working project again? I just said, I don't see how.
What about you, Brandon? What do you think? Do you ever think you'd be in this position here right now, let alone talking to me?
It's been a fascinating journey. Like what he alluded to, you know, we recorded that first EP in 2014. We only played, I think, one show between 2014 and 2016. And then from 2016 to 2017, we played a lot, in a pretty short amount of time all over the state of Florida. We were looking at starting to look at playing outside Florida, and then things kind of started to fall apart just with us never being able to maintain a constant lineup. And then at the time, Thomas was newly married, and things were hard getting practices together just between the two of us, trying to get in like a constant lineup on top of that made it harder. I ended up joining another band to make things a little bit easier and toured a whole bunch with that band. And so at the time, it fell really far on the back burner. And every year that went by, it just got further and further back. And then a few times here and there, we ended up actually recording. And for a lot of different reasons, it just didn't work out. I think part of it is we were always trying to kind of re-record those early songs because we were never super happy with how they turned out. But us as musicians had evolved. And honestly, we weren't really the same type of band that was putting out that sort of music to begin with anymore. And so we kind of started to look forward at, well, what are we doing now? All of a sudden, things just kind of clicked into place.
And is this the song that you were originally going to start with anyway? Or did you kind of have a few that you were jumping about with?
It was the song that kind of jump started the reunion, so to speak. I was just this was earlier this year, like at the beginning of the summer. I was just kind of messing around in my home studio, just noodling on the guitar, and I was like, I kind of like the sound of that. So I recorded what ended up becoming the outro, just that kind of like Midwest emo-y kind of jangly guitar line at the end. And I threw some chords behind that and sequenced some drums, and I sent it to Brandon, and I was like, is this anything, or is this just noise? Because it's hard for me to tell sometimes. It's like, is this a song, or is it just a collection of riffs? And he was like, no, dude, that's really, really good. I was like, all right. So I worked backwards from that and ended up recording the rest of the song and then placing that portion as the outro. And I didn't really know what to do with it. I didn't know if I was like going to present it to my other band that I have here in Nashville, or if it was just going to be maybe released as a solo song, or more likely, based on all the other stuff I've done, it's just going to sit on my hard drive and not go anywhere. So then I sent him the completed thing, and he was like, this is really good. And then in a couple of days, he sends me back the same file with vocals over top of it. He just banged out these incredible lyrics, and I was like, wow, this is a complete song. And we started going back and forth and talking about it. And he asked, this is a crazy idea, but let me just put this out there. Would you be interested in releasing anything under Picking Up Pedro again? And I was like, I've been having the same thought. I think this needs to be a Picking Up Pedro song. So the song kind of brought the band out of this purgatory that it's been sitting in. So it wasn't planned at all. but the song just needed to come out, and this is how it decided to do it.
And I imagine, Brandon, you were quite surprised when you received that message, or I guess whoever sort of messaged it to who.
Yeah, no. So when he messaged that to me, so the thing is, like, we've known each other since second grade, and we've always, we've been best friends pretty much since that time. And so we've always kind of like thrown riffs back and forth at each other and just various little recordings. But usually, like, when we do that, honestly, they kind of just end up on a hard drive somewhere, and we never really go about it. But there was something about this one for sure that was just different, basically from the start. And I think I knew that the second I heard it. And then I think, once we heard the whole thing back with everything together, it was definitely different than everything that we had done previously over the last few years. But to answer that initial question earlier too, like, as far as like, was it this song? It was this song that that did kickstart this band being a thing again, for sure. But like, going back when we were trying to record over the years, previous times, it was always usually the same songs from that EP, just trying to make them sound the way that we initially wanted them to sound, and just never really getting there. And then also some other various songs too, and just never really quite finding what we wanted. And I think that's honestly the case for a lot of bands. Like, you have a certain sound in your head, and when you hear the finished product, that sound doesn't sound the same as it did in your head. And then you go like, all right, let's just put this on the back burner. And then you mess around with it a million times. And that's kind of the curse of having the ability to record things yourself, instead of, having a budget and a limited time frame to go into a studio and be like, okay, this has to be done today.
I guess you're always imagining, like, everyone deep down is a perfectionist, and if it doesn't sound the exact way it does in your head, then you sort of think, oh well, it's not the finished product. We'll just
right, exactly.
We'll put it somewhere and come back to it, and then ostensibly you never do.
And the longer you listen to it, it's always, well, what if we change this part? What if I add this? What if we mess with
never
this?
Done.
It's never done.
It's never a finished product.
Yeah. That's the thing that killed this band for like 6-7 years. So
yeah.
It was us being like, eventually, every other year, we'd get back together. I'd either drive down to Nashville or he'd come up here. And we would like goof around with recording that stuff. And then we would listen back to it and be like, well, it needs this. And it'd be like, oh, that's going to require us to get back together again. And then it just didn't happen. But really, we kind of discovered throughout the process of this one that we don't have to be in the same room for these things to happen anymore. Like, technology is there.
Well, it's exactly like what we're doing now. We're in
exactly
3 different parts around the world. Me across the pond from you guys, and here we are. Yeah. But I think, how does that affect the creative process? Is it something that you've kind of acclimatized to, or is it just, did it sort of come naturally when you were doing it?
This one was really different. And it did sort of come naturally, actually. Usually, like, the way this band was in the past, like that EP from 10 years ago, I wrote those songs pretty much on my own. And then I was like, okay, they're not really that great. Let me see if Thomas, who was like my best friend, who actually played guitar, like none of my other friends really played guitar. I was like, let me see if Thomas has any ideas on how to add things to this. And then, we kind of just went from there. So I had already had like fully written songs minus some auxiliary guitar parts. And then we went into the studio and recorded them. And then over the years since then, we've been writing together, but none of those songs ever saw the light of day. This one was really different because for the first time, Thomas actually wrote the whole song musically from beginning to end, all the instruments, everything on his own. And then I just added the lyrics, vocals, and mixed and mastered it.
And it's now come out as it is. I personally really like it. I was going to get into the title straight away, but I think, having mentioned the previous album a few times, or the previous EP, does it have almost a nostalgic feeling to it, or do you still look back and go, this is how I'd rather it had come out?
When I listen to the recordings, I definitely get those feelings of like, oh man, I wish we could have done XYZ. But the nostalgia is absolutely there, because for me, when I hear those songs still, I remember driving around the state in our beat up clunker cars, playing shows in dive bars and small cap venues with my best friends in the whole world, having some of the best nights of my life. So to me, those songs, even if I'm not super satisfied with the way they're presented to the world, I'm very, very happy with what came of those songs. Because if you had asked, what do you think is going to come of it when we went to that studio in 2014 to record that EP, I wouldn't have known. I would not have known that the next several years would be filled with that much fun and adventure.
Yeah, I think for me, going back and looking at that, there'll be times when I'll just like type in Picking Up Pedro on Spotify and bring it up. And I'm really happy looking at the artwork for the EP, and then I press play and I'm like, oh. and then I press pause and I move on with my day. But the thing is when I just look at that artwork, I can go back and remember like this band, we always had issues with those initial recordings, and we were broke college students. We just didn't have the money to do things, and we didn't have the know-how or the equipment to record on our own yet. And obviously we do now, and we're pretty happy with the results of what we're able to do now. But, regardless of all that, this was a band that we played a lot of shows and we did have fans. And you know what? The recordings never really prevented us from doing what we wanted to do. We played to a lot of great crowds all around the state. So it was a great time.
Yeah.
And of the songs that are in there, regardless of your opinions of them now, are there any that sort of stand out to you? Because obviously there's 5 tracks there. It was your introductory one. There's a fair bit of stuff there. Are there any that you are genuinely prouder of than others, or is it mostly just a conglomerate of
Well,
whatever?
I like the songs. I like the songs a lot. I just don't like the recordings. So like Goodbye Nostalgia to me is still a great song. And eventually Absolutely. I think that one will see the light of day again, recorded better, things done a little bit differently. So there's songs that absolutely I love off of that. I like that song a lot. I still like Everything You Know a lot. I still like I'm the Enemy a lot. The other 2 songs I feel like could use additional work if I was ever to go back to them. But, that's neither here nor there. I mean, a lot of songs are like that when you go back and look at your previous work. I don't know. Like, do you play in a band? Like, do you record or?
No. Well, I play guitar. I've got one, and then my roommate plays bass. But I've never.
That's a band right there.
There's hard, and then my brother, my brother plays drums about 20 miles away. So we've always
you're set.
We've always considered it, and I've thought about it a lot. We've had like a number of chats with some friends of mine of like band names and themes for albums and stuff, but it's just never materialized. I think we just don't trust ourselves to do a good job. So
well, so that's the whole thing is like, as I was about to say, is like when you start, you will in fact do a bad job. And that's kind of what we did on that first EP. And then the thing is, though, you get better. And then you go back and you look at stuff and you're like, oh, but you have to understand, like, that's part of the journey of getting to the point of where you want to be. And like for us, this band was really early on in our, like starting to play out and starting to write songs. And it is still on the internet for people to see, but at the same time, like I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today without that. And that's important,
Yeah.
I guess that's the insight you get from stuff like that. I mean, I used to make like really old YouTube videos like everyone did in their teens and in their sort of late teens, I guess. And they're still unlisted on YouTube somewhere. And every once in a while, I'll go back to them and go, man, that was god awful. But it's led me to a point where I'm still able to creatively, show myself, as it were. You just have your past to look back. And I imagine that now that you've got this new song, you can put your entire focus on this sound that you're creating now, just having that in the past anyway.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, getting to that, to be honest, for those who don't know, the new song, Break Up the Wedding, came out on Friday. We're recording this on the 1st of December, so yay, Christmas. But where did that name in particular seems very specific. So I was interested to see where the origins of that title came from.
I'll let Brandon take it from here. But I do want to say, one of my favorite things about Brandon as a songwriter and as a recording musician is he is going to do everything he can to stuff as many references to things that he loves into his music as possible. And he'll reference old YouTube channels that we used to like. He'll reference movies. He'll reference TV shows that we love. If you go and look through some of his discography with other bands, it's just chock full of it. So this comes from that, and I'll let him kind of take it from there.
Looking forward to this.
Yeah. So this one is a double-edged sword. There's kind of 2 meanings. The number one is the reference, and that's the main thing. And it's part of like as part of a concept that we had. We had this idea for 4 songs, and the first one was going to be "Break Up the Wedding," and the second one was going to be "Steal the Princess," and the third one, actually, I feel like I'm getting them out of order. So hold on, wait. It was break up. Thomas, what was it? What was the 4 names?
It was All We Have to Do Is Get In There,
Yeah,
Break Up the Wedding, Steal the Princess, and Make Our Escape.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. So
which is a line from.
Yeah, it's a line from Princess Bride.
Yeah,
if you've ever seen that film.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it was going from. And then my other band's called the Classic Blunders, which is also a reference to that movie. And so basically, like, every song title and everything that I do usually has some sort of reference, but it's that. But there is kind of a double-edged meaning on this one in particular, because so it's "Break Up the Wedding," referencing that, but also what the song is about, lyrical content. It's not, I don't know how personal we want to get here, but it did involve a literal broken up wedding as well. So there's that.
You can go into details if you like. The other half of this podcast is mental health awareness, so I don't know how deep into it you'd like to go.
Fair. Long story short, basically, I met this girl. We fell in love over a very short amount of time, and then it turned out that she was married. So that was fascinating. Yeah, right. But when we met, it was one of those things where they were kind of going through the process to get a divorce, but there were kids involved, so it's taking a very long time. And then that process extended for a very long time, and the whole thing ended very poorly. So that's kind of where it went. So
complicated for sure.
Yeah,
but it sounds like you've added a bit of levity to that situation by having the sort of Princess Bride element in there as well. It means that it's not all about that. You can add a bit of oomph to it, as it were.
Yeah, the song is if you listen to it lyrically, it is pretty dark for a good amount of the song. It's kind of about that whole process and the feelings afterwards. But it really wasn't it wasn't one of those things where it was all negative. There were a lot of positive emotions involved, and I wouldn't say that I necessarily regret the way things happened either, if that makes sense.
And I imagine, considering all of that history and the way the songs come out, how do you feel about it now that it's out in the open in the public?
I don't know. It's such a, lyrically, it's such a personal thing. I don't usually ever have to explain these things. So this is a very different experience for me, talking about where the song came from. I don't think most people will ever actually know what it is about. I think usually we'll just talk about the Princess Bride reference, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure she'll hear it at some point, and I'm sure that will be fascinating too. So,
but this is the thing. This is why I do, not to catch you off guard, obviously, but this is why I like doing stuff like this, because it means that you guys, for better or worse, can delve into the histories of where these ideas come from. And I think a lot of people don't. Some people don't like that, but I personally find it really interesting. Knowing that there's 2 different sides of this one song. There's multiple stories into it. I just think that's really interesting.
I think mostly this song for me was just, I heard that music, and I kind of knew immediately what I would write lyrically for it, because of what I was going through at the time. And so it was kind of therapeutic to just start recording. And that's kind of always the way it's been for me as a songwriter. If there's something that is bothering me, I'm always able to just start recording. And I feel like that's something that more people should have, honestly. It's really, really beneficial.
No, absolutely. And Thomas, what do you think in terms of a musician side to it?
Yeah, so this was, like Brandon mentioned, this was a very different experience, because most of the time, when we were working together in the past, it was always, he'd come to me with half or 3/4 of a song, and he'd be like, all right, let's flesh this out. And then we'd flesh it out together, and we'd come to something really cool. This was the first time where I had done everything from beginning to end. And I've never been a lyricist. I've tried my hardest, and I don't have that part of the creative spectrum. It's just not there for me. So it was really neat to send this off to him and be like, I wonder what could come of that. And I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist, but I do have somewhat high standards, because there have been times where I've done that. Like, I've come with like 3/4 of a song to my other band, and I'll be like, all right, somebody else write lyrics because I can't do it. And then they'll come back with it, and I'm like, I don't really like that all that much. And then that song just kind of gets pushed to the back burner. So for me to send this to Brandon, who, not to just blow smoke or anything, but is the most talented lyricist and most talented musician I know, for him to come back with something that the first time I heard it, I thought, wow, that's what this song is about. I had no idea the whole time this is what that song was about.
And it must be nice to have, such a strong friendship in there as well. The amount of support you must give each other for this kind of stuff must be, exponential at this point.
Yeah, it's huge.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge. Like I've been in a lot of bands over the years, and I've been pretty good friends with most of those guys. And there's been some bands that have ended poorly, like I feel like most people who have been in a ton of bands have had. But there's definitely a difference when you're in a band like with your best friend, and when you're with a band with people that you met like a couple months ago, and you're just jamming. And there is a massive difference in terms of the camaraderie, I guess I would say. You know what I'm saying? Like it's when you have a bad show with people that are just kind of band friends, it's a really bad night. When you have a bad show with people that are, your best friends, it doesn't really matter because you're hanging out with your best friends.
No,
Makes
absolutely.
a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, have you had any when you were doing all those that touring around Florida, when you were doing these original shows, do you have any like very fond memories of those moments? Because Thomas, you were saying it was just like you guys driving around, having a laugh, and all that stuff. Is there anything that really stands out from those moments?
We had a lot of probably unintentionally hilarious shows, as it goes in the local show scene. You drive 2 hours out to a bar and there's no PA, and nobody told you that there was no PA, and the promoter doesn't show up, so you have to borrow the PA from one of the other bands who's not very happy to let you do that.
Yeah,
but then the show goes on.
In Largo, for example.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we had lots of stuff happen like that, but we also got to play on shows with bands that we were good friends with, and we got to meet a lot of really cool people being a part of that. We got to learn the ins and outs of putting together a show. We got to watch some of our friends achieve a level of success that, maybe made us jealous a little bit, but also made us super, super happy for them. They get to play, festivals, and occasionally I'll be scrolling through, Facebook or Reddit, and I'll be in these communities for like pop punk bands, and they'll just name drop a band that we'd played with like 8 or 9 years ago. And I'm like, I know those guys. So the fact that they have reach outside of our immediate bubble, that's so cool. And, we'd always hoped we'd get to that point, and for a variety of reasons we didn't, but, getting to just be a part of that ecosystem for me, you can have a rough show, but I never had a bad time on stage. I always loved being up there with Brandon and with our other friends who kind of cycled in and out of the band at various points. It was always a good time. And
have you got your aspirations set on anything in particular now that there's been this resurgence, as it were, or are you just looking to get the ball rolling, as it were?
Yeah, I think getting the ball rolling was the number one thing. Like I said, we wanted to put something out for the 10-year anniversary of that last EP. But there will be more songs released next year. And hopefully, it's gonna depend on how economically feasible things are next year. But hopefully at some point we can make some live shows happen again. So that's on the agenda.
Yeah.
What's the well, I don't know how much you're willing to share with a measly old man like me, but what are the next songs? Are you still planning to do that concept EP that you were talking about?
Yeah. Well, so I don't know if we're planning on releasing it in EP format anymore like we were, but those 4 songs will definitely be coming out under those names. Yeah.
Yes.
And is that next year's project for now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. And who else is there? So there's you two. Do you have anyone else? It's just the 2 of you now.
Yep.
Yeah. So we always cycled in and out. We could never keep a drummer, which is the bane of so many bands, but it was definitely the bane of our band. We could never keep a consistent drummer. and then we'd get a consistent drummer, and then it just wouldn't work out. So we'd be like, all right, let's get somebody else. And then we'd be back on the carousel. And it was that put us on hiatus for so long.
And actually, sorry, not to interrupt you, but there was one point where we had, after struggling through like lineup hell for years, it was going to be a resurgence. We had a perfect lineup. We played one show. Everything was about to go great. And I got like deathly ill. I literally almost passed away. And then Thomas moved to Nashville, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. So for really the entire run, it was just the two of us. And going back to the 2014 EP, it was just the two of us in the studio. So we were always kind of like the nucleus of the band. Not that we kind of took any kind of precedence or importance over anybody else. Anyone who was in was a full member of the band. There were no hired guns. It was nothing like that. But we were the only two constants. And so coming back to it at this point, it was kind of nice because, normally if you want to get a band back together, you got to call 4 or 5 people. And if somebody's not interested, well, then okay, maybe it doesn't happen. But, all we had to convince was each other. So.
And I'm sure that wasn't that difficult because you were already like both in the same mindset of like, I've been thinking about this and I think we should do it.
It was easy to come around to because of the fond memories I'd had. And because I moved to Nashville in 2019. So I had 1 year here before COVID came through and jacked everything up. And I didn't play out again until I joined my current new band earlier this year. So I went almost 6 years between being on stage. And I'd forgotten how much I loved it. I love the band I'm in now. They're a great group of people. They're super awesome, very talented musicians. And we have a lot of fun on stage. But it got me thinking about these older days where Brandon and I would play together and how much fun that was. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought we have so much unfinished business associated with this project. There was so much we wanted to do and we couldn't. And now we're at a point where, well, why can't we? You can't repeat the past, but maybe you can finish it,
How much do you think would be, well, I guess when you say unfinished business, sounds awfully serious, but I guess that's like you're off to kill someone. You hired hitmen.
Maybe we are.
maybe that's what it is. Well, maybe that's what the plan is, to pick up Pedro. Maybe that's what the plan has been all along.
Man, that's a fascinating.
Do you want to tell the story behind the name?
There's not that much of a story. The story was, I was on my way to pick up our friend Pedro to go to a.
He's a real guy.
He's a real dude.
Yeah, he's a real dude. Yeah, I was on my way to pick up our friend Pedro, to go to this local comic shop, and Thomas called me and was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" That's where the name came from.
Yeah, he literally said, "I'm picking up Pedro," and we were like, "Dude."
How does he feel having a band name after him?
To be honest with you, I don't think he ever came to see that band. Maybe once. He doesn't really. He's one of those friends that, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like, oh, you like friendship's over or anything like that, but he got married, and he's one of those people that, like, once they get married, you basically never see them again. Some people are like that. Some people don't really change at all once that happens, but it's definitely kind of more of that vibe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've kept the name, so even 10 years on. I mean, would you consider changing it for this revamp, or was it always going to be this?
No, so we did change it. Yeah, so when we got that lineup, it was 2018.
Yes.
My other band at the time, I was in this band called the Problematics FL, and that band was touring quite a bit. And we had a fill-in bass player because the bass player in that band actually was unfortunately experiencing a lot of health issues. So we had a fill-in bass player, and I realized that I was kind of better friends with that fill-in bass player than I was with the rest of that band. And me and Thomas at that time were talking about starting this band up again. And so we enlisted him. We got the original drummer from Picking Up Pedro that we'd had for precisely one show. And we changed the name at that time. I think we changed it to Where We Left Off.
Yes.
And then we played one show, and I got the flu, and it went systemic somehow. And basically I got so sick, and this sounds exaggerated, but it's not. I got so sick that I literally lost 70 pounds in a week and a half, and I went blind.
Jesus.
I literally went blind in one eye, and I had to get injections for like a year and a half to fix it.
So in that time, we played that one show. We had all these ideas of doing a whole bunch more stuff. I got super sick, couldn't do anything for quite a while. And then Thomas ended up moving, and then it kind of just fell apart. And then that name kind of just sat there. We didn't have super fond memories of what happened immediately after that show. So when we talked about like doing this again, it just made a lot more sense to use the name Picking Up Pedro again.
I mean, it's a fairly innocuous story, to be honest. I was expecting like some grandiose like experience, but it's just picking up some bloke that you knew.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It's just exactly.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. No, he called and I was like, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Picking up Pedro," and he's like, "That's the name."
we got it.
Well, and you want to talk about growth. How we're such a different people from how we were back then, and the music kind of reflects that. And back then, I was so self-serious about a lot of things, and especially when it came to music. And I thought, no one is ever going to take a band seriously with a name like that. Like it's just not, that doesn't scream serious band. So we did the rebrand, and then, I moved away, and I kind of had some space from that for a while. And then, my musical taste kind of evolved and changed. And I went back to a lot of like the pop punk stuff that was popular when we were in school. And then when we were talking about it, it occurred to me, the most famous pop punk band in the world right now is called Hot Mulligan. Like, if they can get famous off a name like that, then I was an idiot for being so concerned about Picking Up Pedro.
You've hit the nail on the head right there. I think the name, if anything nowadays, especially in a genre like that, having a name that's a bit more cynical and just kind of silly actually works better. So
yeah.
I don't
100%.
know.
And I was always kind of on board with that. That was my thing, is I always felt like every name of every band should be silly, because most of the bands that I listened to growing up had ridiculous names. Like, I mean, like my favorite band growing up, like the two top two bands for me were always Jimmy Eat World and MXPX. And I mean, MXPX is, abbreviated magnified plaid. Like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? So,
I think
I always felt like the name should be silly.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right with that, and it's a great name. When I saw you guys pop up in my messages, I was like, "That's not one I expected at all." That's a name that I saw it and I went, "Is that the band name, or is that just this guy's like profile? He's called Pedro." But I was so I was so confused initially, thinking, "What? I don't know how this story is going to come about." And you explained it in about 25 seconds. So there's.
You're like, I was expecting this to take 45 minutes. Damn it. How do we proceed with this?
Oh, no. I had my entire podcast prepared for 45 minutes of explaining this name, and it's all over. Speaking of Hot Mulligan, I believe you mentioned, MXPX, Jimmy Eat World, and such. Do you have any major influences from your earlier years in 2014 who obviously inspired your music? And do you have any in the modern day now, like Hot Mulligan, who have sort of pushed you towards the sound you have now?
So for me, a lot of my big influences, I listened to, back in those days, I wasn't quite as into pop punk. Like, I was into some bands that were like pop punk adjacent.
Yeah.
And like some emo type stuff. My biggest band at that time was Anne Berlin. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were probably my favorite band of all time, especially them being, hometown heroes. They were also from Florida. So they played Orlando every single tour they went on, and I got to see them every time, and they were always so great. And off in the corner there, I've got like a little Anne Berlin shrine going on of just memorabilia I've collected over the years. So they were a big influence on me. And then I was big into stuff like the Foo Fighters, kind of just like big, like mainstream rock and roll. So that's kind of where I was coming from at that time. Nowadays, my influences are a little bit more straight up pop punk. This particular song, musically, the biggest influence for me was probably the Early November.
Oh wow, that's the name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, so they've become my wife's favorite band. And it's funny how it happened. Like 7 years ago, I want to say, we were vacationing in St. Augustine, Florida, for our first wedding anniversary, and we were just kind of bopping around town doing whatever. We walked into a record store, and they were playing the Early November over the speakers. They were playing their album Imbue, which had come out about 2 years prior to that. And my wife was immediately smitten. She's like, I really like this. So she went up to the counter and was like, who is this band? And it's the Early November. So that started this love that we've had for them. Gotten to see them 3 times since living in Nashville. And this particular time, the last time we saw them, they came through earlier this summer with Cliff Diver and Hit the Lights, which is kind of
Oh,
a yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the lights are one of my favorites.
They were fantastic. And then the early November played, and then afterwards, Ace, their vocalist, was just kind of hanging around, just talking to people, and he talked to me for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And he just gave me some fantastic advice about prioritizing music, because I was like, yeah, I've been sitting on a lot of these songs and I just don't know what I'm going to do with them. And he's like, dude, you just got to put that stuff out there. Just gave me some real good encouragement. And then after that show is when I kind of sat down and started to write this song, which in hindsight had a lot of influences from their sound. So after we released it on Friday, I actually sent it to him in an Instagram DM, and I was like, hey Ace, I don't know if you remember, we talked for a while, and I just want to let you know this song doesn't happen without your encouragement. So, this is probably going to go to your spam folder, but just in case you see it, I just wanted to say thanks. So they're a big influence on me right now. Spanish love songs is a big one as well. Story So Far, kind of a lot of those pop punk acts that are at the top of their game at the moment.
I was going to say, because a lot of them have had recent albums. The early November had their self-titled this year,
Yes,
if I'm not
which is
mistaken.
fantastic.
Really good. Spanish Love Songs had No Joy, which I think was
Yes.
last year. Excellent record. And then obviously the stories so far have come back after 6 years or whatever,
Yes.
with I Want to Disappear. And I saw them live in the UK about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That was a good moment, just seeing that album. But that's quite a variation of sort of Midwest emo and then like definitive pop punk from the story so far. So you've got a nice variation of a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Brandon, are you fairly similar?
No, recent, yeah, but originally no. Like for me, I grew up. I mean, when I was a kid, we rented Tony Hawk Pro Skater when I was 5 on the Nintendo 64. All right, 1999, and like I heard Superman by Goldfinger. I heard Suicide Machines, New Girl, and that literally defined music for me as a kid. I started listening to bands like Less Than Jake, being from Florida, that was huge. MXPX was huge for me growing up. Jimmy Eat World was and still is my favorite band probably. So I would say like that late 90s, early 2000s pop punk sound was really where I was right from the start. And there was a lot of like the Fat Record stuff I was really into too. Like I was really into like No Use for a Name and Strung Out. Which, speaking of which, we used to like back in the Picking Up Pedro days. We played with this band called Backstabber, and Thomas actually used to work with their drummer. He's currently the drummer of Strung Out. So,
oh wow,
I worked with them at Guitar Center.
Fun times there, but
yeah.
But yeah, so we, that was kind of more for me. And then in recent years, I've been listening to like, Spanish love songs. I'm huge on. I was trying to get Thomas into them years ago. And I was really happy when he finally like stumbled upon them on his own. It was like, all right, no, yeah, this is awesome. But I was really into them and like Free Throw. But lately, I've been on more of like a Flatliners, like Hot Water Music. Banner Pilot has been like my favorite band for the last few years, even though they haven't been around for years. More of that vibe.
And I guess that's kind of you still have that central crux of pop punk in there, but you've sort of splintered off into your own little worlds.
Yeah, I think lyrically for me, something about Banner Pilot,
just I don't know. There's something different about that band. And I think you will like if you listen to the lyrics of this song and you listen to like Banner Pilot, you probably hear a lot of that influence in there.
It's good to hear that you've got like very strong lyrical influences there, and then Thomas, you've got your very strong sort of musical influences. I mean, did you get any encouragement from other bands like Thomas did, or is it mostly just your own personal sort of, I don't know, I guess personal encouragement? Like, did you just push yourself to write music about these experiences that you've had?
For me, I think writing has always been therapeutic. And that's kind of more where I'm coming from it. And I think that's part of the problem, honestly, with why things don't get released a lot of times that I work on is because the writing portion is therapeutic, but the production portion maybe isn't as much so. And so stuff will be like finished writing wise, but then it won't necessarily ever be finished production wise. But as far as like bands, honestly, I was really fortunate. Like I had a band that played with a lot of really big bands, and we got editorial playlisted like one song below whatever that lead single off of Blink-182's Nine Was on a bunch of Spotify editorial playlists. And so like that band did really well. And back when that band was playing, we played with a lot of bigger bands, and a lot of those guys were really encouraging. But I will say, like, also some things stuck with me that were maybe more discouraging than anything, and it's been Thomas kind of picking me back up out of that. Like I played with the Ataris for the 15th anniversary of So Long Astoria, and that was like a huge moment for me personally. And I remember talking to Chris Rowe and him talking about like, yeah, when whenever this tour is over, we got to go back to work. And it's like, dang, like if that
kind of band isn't really making like legitimate money, at what point do you ever not have to work a standard desk job?
But I guess, yeah, I think that's part of the difficulty of this kind of industry, though, isn't it? I think
it is.
The unfortunate reality is that even for some of the larger bands, I mean, some of the people I've talked to in terms of like any revenue from putting stuff on Spotify I mean, the vast majority of them make their money off tours and the merch that they sell now. The actual music sort of gets put at the back burner, as you've said numerous times. So, but I guess a lot of people don't necessarily do it for that. It's just the
100%.
100%. You don't do it for that, but there's always this sense in the back of your mind that like, how much more of this stuff could I be doing if I wasn't working 40 hours a week plus, Yeah.
No, I know the feeling. I know the feel. Like literally just doing this, for me, it's nearly 9 o'clock in the evening on a Sunday. So I've found my time. But knowing full well that I have to get up at 8:30 tomorrow.
Exactly.
To go back. I'd much rather just do this and chat to loads of people for the day. But
exactly.
Tis the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you found any other sort of challenges in not just the recent song, but in general with the band? Have you found anything that sort of knocked you back, but you found a way to claw back to where you are now? Obviously, Brandon, you said that Thomas was helping you through that, but have you found as a collective any difficulties?
Well, we don't live. I mean, it's like a 10-hour drive.
We're 500 miles apart.
Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
Which
I just forget how big. I forget how big America is.
Yeah, we used to be basically just across the street from each other. We live in adjoining
two different times. We lived across the street from each other in two different states.
We went to the same school. We played high school football together. We spent all of our free time together. So to go from that to then being like maybe seeing each other 2 or 3 times a year, if we're lucky. It's been hard from a musical standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. Brandon, he's my best friend in the world, and I love him like a brother. He was the best man in my wedding. He's the first person I call when I have bad news. He's the first person I call when I have good news. So to have that distance, it sucks in so many ways. Including and up to our musical collaboration.
I mean, have you acclimatized to it at all, or do you just wish you were still, on the same street?
Well, I think the beauty of where things are now is that us working on music doesn't ever devolve into, okay, let's go play a video game.
Yeah.
So, like that, it's, us working on music doesn't devolve into let's go play, a video game or watch a crappy horror movie or whatever. But also like we're able to do things over the internet. This is 2024. It's not that hard. And we're both in jobs, I think, where we can, once we can get the lineup set and we have songs that we want to go play, I think we're at a point where we can actually go do that. So, it's doable.
Well, I guess that's the unfortunate compromise of that kind of thing, isn't it? At least, 10 hours you can do in a day, I guess, but you wouldn't enjoy it.
No,
many times.
Well, I guess what's the future for you guys? Obviously, you've got a few songs coming up. You've got your latest release, but where do you see the band going now that it's now that the first song is out, that the reunion has now officially begun? Where do you see yourself going next?
So without saying too much, like I said, we have those 4 songs, but we also. I think the goal is to head back down to Florida and play some songs down there, back in the venues that we used to play, back where all of our friends still are.
Do you have much of like a goal list or an aspiration list for for the band, or do you just have like little things that you want to tick off as you go along?
I mean, I think everybody's got like, big aspirations. It'd be cool if you could, I kept joking when they announced that Warped Tour was coming back. I was like, so we're playing this, right? And he's like, oh yeah, man, totally. But I mean, they are doing the Ernie Ball battle with the band, so it could happen. You'd love to do something like that. And realistically, if I had any choice of what I could do with my life, it'd be this. So that's the pie in the sky aspiration. More down to earth. Honestly, just getting this song out there is such a huge sense of accomplishment for me, as a musician who, Brandon's been in other projects and he's been able to release different stuff over the years. But for me, ever since the 2014 release, this is the first thing I've put out that I've been involved in. So to have sat on so much and to have, had so many moments where it looked like something was going to happen and then it didn't happen, to finally have this thing out there and it exists out in the world, to me, that's such a sense of accomplishment. On the one hand, it's satisfying to the point where it's like, well, if it's this and nothing else, then that's cool. But then at the other hand, it's so satisfying. It's like, I want more of that. I want to put out more music. I want to play shows as part of this project. So yeah, I'd love to get back down to play in Florida and go to some of the venues that we used to haunt in the old days. And I'd love to get out on the road and play some new venues. We're in a totally different part of the country now. It's an untapped, unseen market for us. So I'd love to do either one or both of those things if they're possible.
I imagine, Brandon, you're fairly similar in that vein, just getting back on the road and getting it out there.
Yeah, I think ultimately, once you've played music, no matter how far away from it you are, no matter how long it's been, like, there's never a time where you're not feeling the itch to go do it again, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, in some cases, I mean, that's why you see people like Vince Neil making a complete fool of themselves on stage, or various things like that. But like, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah.
When you're a musician, like, once you've experienced that, it's the greatest feeling in the world, and you just always want to do it again.
Yeah. Every show I've ever played, whether in this band or my current band or any other project, every show I've ever played, I've had the same thought, which is I want to do this every night for the rest of my life. And that hasn't gone away. So I have to lean into that until it does.
You just got to embrace it, haven't you? Just every day.
You have to, or you go crazy.
You get hella tired though, doing that all the time. But I guess.
Oh yeah.
But it's the good kind of tired. I'm tired from working my desk job, and I think the other one's a lot more fun.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, I guess the only other things really is like the song that's out now. Obviously, it's a different sound to what your previous EP was. Do you have any plans to experiment further, or are you just going to stick predominantly with that quintessential pop punk sound that you've found now?
So the next song we have in the hopper, I think it's mostly done. There's a couple of little touches that need to be made, and then it has to be like mixed and mastered and all that good stuff. But the next one that's coming out is a little heavier. It's a little more straight up kind of emo-ish. So we're doing what we can to not kind of pigeonhole ourselves into a particular sound. It's just whatever sounds good to us at the time. That's what we want to do. So it's going to be familiar. It's going to sound like us, but we're not going to keep ourselves in too small of a box. Mm-hmm. I think Brandon would agree with that, or he's free to shoot that down if he doesn't.
Yeah, no, I think the big thing is as right now, this next song, it's still pretty similar. It is a little heavier. It's a little different, but it definitely sounds like it would belong on the same EP or the same album. It's pretty similar. Yeah. But I think, over time people change, and as such, I don't think it's even possible to maintain the exact sound over long periods of time. And I think that's evidenced over the difference between that EP 10 years ago and where we are right now. It's just, as you get older, you become a better musician, and then you get too old and you become a worse musician. And then, things change. Nothing's ever in a constant state.
Well, even those songs that we recorded 10 years ago, even just being 2 or 3 years removed from that recording process, when we would go out and play those, they would be
they were completely different.
Mostly unrecognizable, some of them.
Yeah.
We had reworked and revamped them in different ways to update them to how we have updated as people and musicians. So, everybody has a band that they like and they listen to, and they put out an album and it's like, that's not really for me. But then it's somebody else's favorite. And it's like, you have to recognize that you can't just keep writing the same songs over and over and over again. And as musicians, we know that because we can't keep writing the same songs over and over again. You have to grow and adapt and change with who you are, or else you stop being satisfied with what you put out.
No, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, lyrically, Brandon, do you think you're going to delve into other topics, more like much like this previous track that's sort of got those double meanings, as it were? Do you plan on delving to any other sort of deeper meanings, or just keeping it to the surface level stuff?
Yeah, I don't really feel like most of my songs have ever really been super surface level, I guess. There's always been things that, you could listen to it and just kind of get that from it, but there's always been things that have been personal to me in every song that I've ever written, or at least most of them. I guess I can think of one specific song where there's not, but for the most part, there's always been things that have been personal to me, and it just kind of is wherever my life is at that point. That's what I'm writing lyrically. And so like Break Up the Wedding and also the next one are basically the same topic, but there's other topics as well that I've been writing about too. So
it sounds like you've got quite a plan ahead of you. I mean,
I don't know if I'd call it that, but
a loose
around in the dark,
a loose agenda, should we say?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you've got ideas brewing. That's for sure, and I think that's just as good as having a plan, because then you can at least then you've got a bit of flexibility to it as well.
If you have a plan, you're doomed for failure, right? Because nothing ever goes according to plan.
No, you don't want to be too stringent, otherwise things are going to go horribly wrong.
Exactly.
Nice. Oh, well, I mean, honestly, you've answered everything perfectly. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out in 2025. Obviously, you've got a lot planned in massive quotation marks. But I guess as sort of a final comment, not just for yourselves, but for people out there. Obviously, Tom, you got advice from Ace from the early November. Do you have any advice for other potential bands out there? And sort of what's the final comment you want to give everyone on the show? The
thing for me for pursuing music has always been, if there's anything else that you can do with your time that's nearly as enjoyable, just do that instead. It'll be much less frustrating. You'll make a lot more money. But if you're like me and this is the only thing in the world you can bring yourself to care about, then you owe it to yourself to do it. You owe it to yourself to, at the very least, try. So yeah, join a band, play crappy dive bars, sleep in a van in a Walmart parking lot. Just do it. Just do it.
And Brandon, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, that really hits the nail on the head. I think for most of us that are doing this, there's literally nothing else that gives us the same feeling. There's literally nothing else that provides the same satisfaction. So you feel like you have to do it. And if you're that person, there really is nothing else. You have to. So just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. Shia LaBeouf would be proud.
Yeah.
From a 2017 meme. My God, I need to get out more.
That's got to be older than that.
I can't even remember. I thought 2017 was a long time ago. And what would you have to say to potential or existing fans of Picking Up Pedro?
Existing fans, I guess. Thanks for waiting. It was funny when we
really long time.
We posted on our Facebook. We just updated our profile picture, which is the first thing a band does when they're coming out of hiatus. They update the profile picture, and everybody's like, "Ooh," which of course we don't have that amount of people to be that ooh about. But somebody did comment. They're like, "Hey, you guys are still around." They're like, "Yeah, I guess." So to existing fans, I'd say thanks for your patience. For potential fans, get in on the ground floor. Everybody likes to brag that, I knew so-and-so back when they were playing basement shows. Well, now's your opportunity.
Back when they were playing basement shows 10 years.
You've moved up a level. You can go on the ground floor now.
Oh, there we go.
You can do a ground floor show. Well, thank you very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having us. This has been great.
I'm glad. Obviously, Break Up the Wedding has been out for only a couple of days now as of recording this. So hopefully, if anyone, do you have anything to put out to people to say where they can find it, or what's coming up, any socials and stuff?
Yeah, we're streaming on all platforms wherever you listen to music: Spotify, Apple, Tidal, Deezer. I don't know what that is, but DistroKid says it's
Tidal
a thing.
and Deezer,
YouTube Music, all that stuff. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're just at Picking Up Pedro everywhere.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out next year. I imagine you're saving some stuff for post 2024 now that this one's out. See what happens with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anything comes up, let me know, because I'd love to see how things develop from here.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
We'd love to be back on.
You are more than welcome.